Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inside the Psychopathic Mind podcast. Again, Jason Smith with Carl Giacono. Carl, how are we today?
Pretty good today, Jason. Ready for another episode? This should be a fun one.
Okay, so yes, this is your topic that you kind of came up with. We're going to roll with it. It should be a fun, interesting one for people that are interested in what is it like to work in a correctional facility or forensic facility as a psychologist. So we're going to kind of delve into some of those things. We're going to call this Tales from the Cage. We hope to do many, many of these. So this is just the first one. But let's throw it over to you, Carl, and take us away.
No, Jason, between the two of us, we must have close to 60 years in institutions or working in forensic populations. So we're doing this a long time, and you not only have a lot of funny stories you come up with, you also have useful insights for people. And certainly
Yes.
working in this environment requires a unique skill set, and there's certainly impediments to it. I remember the first time I worked in a county jail, and it was not the first time in an institution. But the guards would hold me in the solly port for about 20 minutes before they'd let me go in to fool around with me. Now, I will point out that by the end of my time in that particular placement, I was helping rewrite you know, all the manuals for dealing with inmates and suicidal inmates in the institution. And certainly over the time, I gained the respect of the people from law enforcement, which is something we need to gain and for good reason because we have a lot of people in our field that are flakes and they bring in the hug of thug and all the nonsense that is completely out of place in an environment where the people you work with see kindness as weakness, devalue people that are gullible, and on and on. We get back to our criminal personality kind of one. But I wonder, just as a first start, what are some of the impediments you've seen as adjusting to
Uh,
that kind of environment?
well, yeah, you need to be educated on the people that you're dealing with. Um, sometimes, sometimes the inmates could be a little bit easier to deal with than the staff members because they're not either educated on kind of what's going on or cause some of those difficulties. But yeah, I think that would probably be like the first impediment is like you don't know where you're heading into. Like these are not people that are, these are the a very subset of the population that are engaged in things that, manipulating, possibly violent. So you need to really just be aware of your surroundings kind of going in. And if you're kind of that naive, I'm there to help everybody, everyone there is, uh,
Misunderstood.
misunderstood or they had a bad break or things like that. Not to say that there aren't some, but for the majority, you just need to kind of just be alert. You can't go in there not really paying attention, things like that, or bad things could happen.
It's like it raises a point what you said, Jason. A lot of people in the world and they have this view of this is the way the world is. It's kind of rosy. This is how it operates. And they have those views as a way of maintaining their own self-esteem and feeling secure.
Hmm.
But as any psychologist should know, which they don't, whenever you're dealing with any type of population, your first priority is to really understand how they see the world. What are
Yes.
their issues? What do they need to change? There's nothing punitive or hard. It's common sense and it's empathetic. So when we go
Hmm.
into an environment like that where kindness is seen as weakness, so on and so forth, the criminal thinking things, we really have to adjust our perspective to be useful to them.
Yeah, and I think that causes like there'll be different psychologists that maybe just want to get the experience of working in a jail or a prison, right? That's not something they were doing, right? But they've worked in private practice or things like that, and then they do a training there, and they expect it to be kind of the same way. And if you don't have a different kind of mindset, and you're not really there to understand what they're dealing with and how to best help them, I think that causes a problem for the psychologist, at least.
Well, the do-gooders that bring in those perceptions are completely out of place. They put themselves as odds with custody. They cause
Yes.
splitting, which sets up dangerous situations.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can think of some. And the reality, it's all unnecessary Because you think about what are the goals. You're in there as a treater, a mental health person. You don't want these, you want to help these people change. You
Hmm.
also don't want them to create more victims. If you look at
Yes.
law enforcement, they don't want any more crimes. If you look at the inmate that actually wants to change, they also don't want to do more crimes and hurt people. So, see,
Hmm.
we're really aligned across the board. It's where these other it's where people lose sight of that, and policies are set up differently that many of the problems occur because,
Yeah.
none of us want them hurting more people, and even the inmate that wants to change doesn't want to do that. So
Yes.
you're really on board across the board. But when I think of impediments in these environments, the majority of them come over time have come from the mental health side of the camp. Whether you're
Hmm.
working in a hospital and they don't want the officers to go up on the unit because it's not therapeutic, which is
Yep.
totally crazy because part of the therapy with criminals is using their past behaviors and their crimes as an impetus for stopping future ones because you need to analyze that, look at what was done, and come up with things that can be done differently. So that whole
Hmm.
thing's kind of nonsense. The old idea, hug a thug, that basically they're misunderstood, which totally
Yep.
discounts those that have these ingrained patterns that are personality styles that have been going on since childhood for some of them.
Yes.
That it's just one thing. They may say, well, it's just PTSD. Well, no, they've been doing it since 3 years old, and it's now
Yeah.
part of a permanent part of their personality.
Yep.
I'm sure you can think of other things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. The inconsistency too, I think. Not re structured environment's probably the best thing for them. And when you break down that structure, especially when you're trying to change the behaviors and things like that, I think that plays. But yes, the mental health side of things, not thinking that it's personality disorder or if it's psychopathy or not knowing about psychopathy from the mental health side of things is kind of, and not being able to use the terminology or things like that, or feel like you're labeling them or
Well, can you touch more on that? Because that speaks to the need for a specialized type of education when working in those environments.
I can count on my hand how many psychologists have even heard of the PCLR that I've interacted with in the prisons, right? And then just changing, not calling them inmates and, not labeling them, a psychopath or something like that. When it's really the reason why you're doing that is to help educate the staff for safety, possibly for assessment purposes. But when you don't do that and you don't, think about the personality disorders, it causes a big problem within the institution, and it could lead to crime, violent acts towards staff members, making it unsafe.
This happens all the time. I remember when I started in one forensic environment, it was a hospital setting, it was maximum security, and the nursing staff interviewed me about violence protection and dangerousness and so forth. When it came time for the article to come out in the newsletter, the administration pulled it off the thing, saying they didn't want a psychologist in the nursing newsletter. This isn't what it was about. They didn't want open discussions about the potential for violence and such. Subsequent to that, one staff was murdered. Another staff was strangled from behind. Another staff was slashed with a knife. After the staff was murdered, I went from being in this room with the paint peeling off the walls in the back ward someplace to I was going
Mhm.
around the state teaching people in the hospitals violence and risk assessment. And the idea of the PCLR and certain scores, if you obtained them, required further evaluation before you were given further privileges in this setting, became part of institutional policy. But yeah, this denial, we don't want to talk about it. It's
Yeah.
unpleasant. It gets people hurt. Another situation, I'm in an outpatient setting, and this guy comes in. I'm substituting for a therapist that went on vacation, and he comes in during the session and pulls out a knife. Now I find out later I didn't get stabbed. I'm still here. I'm not talking here from beyond, but I find out afterwards that when he came in the door, he told the receptionist at the front door, "I'm so angry today I could kill Carl." Now, I never get that information.
Yep.
So you can see how people, even whether you're law enforcement, would have problems with
Yep.
people that are this naive and gullible because they create the patterns.
Yep.
I can think of staff splitting in an outpatient home, contributing to a youth taking a baseball bat and beating up an older guy to go back to prison. So the staff splitting and the mental health inherently have been more problems in those environments than custody or the law enforcement. Now, you're
Yeah.
going to get it, but I have found most of the times once custody or law enforcement understand who I am, I have something to offer, they
Yes.
actually defer to me and there's no more problems between us.
Yes. I think that that's important. And then I think a more recent thing is psychologists don't want to work in these settings anymore across the board, especially in the United States. Prisons, whether it be state or federal, are severely lacking in psychologists. I think it's just the field just doesn't want to engage in this. It's easier to kind of do work at home, whatever it may be. It's a challenging environment. It's not for everybody, so it's not like, if you're like, hey, I need a job, let me just go to corrections. That's, unless you educate yourself on what you're getting into, I think that
Well,
that could be a problem.
psychologically, this working in these environments, besides the difficulty, besides many of the things we discussed with the personality disorders, what they put into you, the
Hmm.
manipulation, you go home
Yeah.
feeling drained, it confronts the mental health worker basic perception of how they want reality to be,
Yes.
because it's not like that. And they don't
Correct.
want that. They want to maintain their view of how the world is, and they'll do just about anything to keep that. And
Yep.
that's the one thing you have to put aside when you go into these environments. I can remember learning about psychopathy, which came after learning about the criminal personality, and just my thirst for understanding more and more who people were and how I could better help them and what
Yes.
I needed to do. I remember a first practicum experience from my supervisor. I did a Rogerian interview with the inmate, beautiful reflections, beautiful clarifications. And my instructor said, my supervisor said, Carl, this is a great job in there, but is that what they need?
Yeah.
And see, that thought gave me the permission to go way afield from that traditional kind of way of approaching inmates. That
Yes.
challenging and confrontation was what they wanted to need, what they needed, and actually was seen as empathetic because the
Yeah.
just reflecting and just spoon feeding back was seen to them to be weakness. I remember one inmate, after I confronted her on some things, he began to talk in an interview about, well, I did this, doc, and then I really needed money, so I had to do this to support my family and this and that. Where in reality, he was doing drugs and got fired from jobs, wasn't spending any money on the family. But he went on like that. And I said, let me stop you here for a minute. Isn't it true that in reality, you had some jobs, you had some money, but even at work, you were using drugs and irresponsible at work? Isn't it true you took the money from the jobs and rather than giving them to feeding your family, you bought more drugs? And after a
Yeah.
little bit of this, he says to me, Doc, you're supposed to be nice. They have the perception of how they manipulate and how mental
Yes.
health person, but they gain no respect for those mental health workers that don't understand how they are in the world and what it takes to change, which is
Yeah.
valid. None of us should
Yeah.
have respect for naive people that we're looking to for help that are just bringing in their own nonsense about how the world works.
Well, and to go on to touch on that manipulation part, obviously working with female offenders, they think, and it's hilarious, right? They go, oh, yeah, you can go manipulate. Like, it's not manipulation if I know what you guys are doing. Like, it doesn't, like, it's not. It's pretty comical sometimes if yeah, what they try to get by with. So, but yeah, I think what you were talking about, obviously with all the research that I did leading up to working in female prisons and then kind of the observations kind of coming together. Again, not very many psychologists want to work with female offenders. We get yelled at when we research female offenders, but no one really wants to write stuff about them or interact with them. So, I've asked the majority of the correctional psychologists, they would prefer working with males than the female offenders. So my goal is, to use the knowledge that I've gained to better help them, to give them what they need and not what other people think they need.
And you wonder, Jason, how many people coming out of academic settings have even a tenth of the knowledge needed for that? Because see, while we use a lot of cognitive behavioral things, which is the way to go, cognitive restructuring, relapse prevention, so forth, understanding the psychodynamics of what's happening in the interaction is so important in preventing potential disasters and understanding what's going on. For example, talking to this guy, working with him the third session, who's paranoid schizophrenic. He's on medication, so he's stable. He's also antisocial. He's also about 6'4", not a small fellow. Third session, he says to me, Doc, starting to feel towards you like I did towards my wife. Well, okay, now the regular therapist and the academic setting, well, that's great, Carl. You're establishing rapport, etc. A little piece of the data here, he murdered his wife in a delusional state when he thought he saw the devil in her eyes. So, I mean, we take a different approach. And what was happening, because he was paranoid, he was starting to get vulnerable with me. So it was increasing his psychosis. So I was able to say to him things like, I wonder if there's a time you saw me differently. And I was able to restabilize what was becoming a decompensation. I've seen this a lot in paranoid schizophrenic antisocials in the community, working with conditional release populations. He's starting to decompensate. He's starting to do that. And then I'll say, well, how are you interacting with them? You know, and they say, well, I do a feelings model and so forth. Well, paranoids like structure. They're very rigid. They don't like to feel vulnerable. So if you're interacting with them in a style that's causing them to decompensate, whose fault is that? But yes, the knowledge has to be broad and in depth. And I don't know anywhere that's teaching that kind of stuff or even gives credence to it. But the more you are prepared in your arsenal to understand the deep depth dynamics, plus cognitive behavioral work, plus not being clueless by being aware, you're really heads up and, you know, many steps up if you're going to work in those environments. I always thought that forensic psychologists, rather than going to law school, should be excellent clinical psychologists in understanding this first.
Yes. Well, and then psychopathy, right? You need to have a understanding of that. And unfortunately,
Well,
in the field now, it's like the PCLR is considered, you know, not great, and psychopathy doesn't exist. And these are great things that we've seen
comes out of
lately.
academic settings. All
Yeah.
the nonsense comes out of indoctrination, out of academic settings, where these people sit around and they read an article and they come up with their lofty opinions. And then
Yeah.
they have the arrogance to offer those opinions as if they're fact, versus someone
Yes.
that's worked 20 years in the place and actually struggles with this, you know, and
Yeah.
goes on to learn. It's a rampant disease in our profession, unfortunately, where they
Hmm.
align with social advocacy and political correctness rather than in-depth knowledge. In fact, in-depth knowledge tends to be devalued. But
Yes.
you know, Jason, when I think about it, we talk about criminal personality. I think people would think we're callous. We don't care about people. I can tell you
Yes.
hundreds of examples of inmates that I've cared about and been very compassionate to within the structure of reality. I'll give you an
Yes.
example. Here's Jimmy. It's a patient I had years ago. Now, Jimmy, he'd get up there. He's never going to make it in the community. He's like schizophrenic. He's got manic issues and he's antisocial and brain damage. But so, you know, he's just never going to make it. But Jimmy was a humorous guy. If you give him some time, hey, Jimmy, what's happening today, man? You take some time to listen to him. He'll get up and pace back and forth. If you gave him a handkerchief, he'd look like a Baptist minister at the height
Hmm.
of their sermon. And Jimmy's going on ranting and raving and stuff. And just, you know, I got real attached to this guy. And he used to like a sweater that I wore. So I couldn't give Jimmy, you know, he's a patient. I can't give him something. But when I left the institution for a different job, I got this sweater to him from in through the patient's group, you know, that they could get it into them in appropriate
Uh-huh.
channels. So I already got the sweater. And about a month after I left, I talked to one of my buddies back there. Hey, say, how's Jimmy doing? Well, you know, Carl, he's just the same. And, you know, he's giving his speeches in group and stuff. He's doing okay. And I said, well, did he like that sweater I got to him? Oh, yeah, he really liked that. I said, well, what happened to it? He said, well, he wore it for 3 weeks and then he traded for a pack of cigarettes. So it just goes to show you, you know, our attachment to people, even
Yes.
ones with severe dysfunction, is quite different than their attachment to us. Now, I'd
Yes.
still give that sweater to Jimmy again. And you have to be willing. One of the reasons that people don't like to work in this environment as mental health
Hmm.
workers is for some folks, you have to readjust your expectations considerably.
Yes.
See, my goal with Jimmy is I'm going to spend time interacting with him on a daily basis, checking in with him. And I
Hmm.
really do like to hear how he's doing and what's going on. And
Yep.
that human contact, that may be the only thing in his life experience that provides that sort of connection with someone that really gives a crap about him, is going to listen to him for a little bit of time.
Yes.
So your goal comes from rehabilitating and changing an individual like that to just making a human contact that has some meaning for them. I can think of another old guy who was a schizoaffective patient. The same thing, lonely, no place to go, is never going to make it in the community. If he did, it would just be on meds in some sort of structured home. But he used to say to staff, hey, does Dr. Carl need to see me today? Because he just wanted time to know that somebody cared about him enough to sit down, wasn't rushed, wasn't looking at the next patient or the next billing thing, moving on to the next, but just really, had an interest in him for who he was and what was important to it. So it
Yeah.
really, those environments stretch you as a mental health person to changing your views and opinions in all kinds of ways.
I totally agree. Yes, those kind of stories, well, just being there for especially the female inmates, the women when they come, um, when I say I'm going to do something, I do it. So they like the place where they can come in and talk or whatever it may be, and if they need something, I will follow up or send that through. And I think that's, I think, yeah, like you said, people see like, oh, they're just inmates or things like that. I'm not really caring about them. No, I have a genuine connection. I want to see them do well. I want to see them release. I don't want to see them come back. Um, you have to, again, maybe set some structure, set some consequences. But overall, I would prefer that. And one of the stories that you kind of just triggered, when I was on internship, we had a rotation and mental health unit in the prison. And there was a guy that he would cut himself, on his stomach, his arms, he was cutting himself. So my supervisor pretty much said, all right, for this 4 months, pretty much you're going to be his only, because he would split and he would get frustrated with things. So I would be the one, check in with him every day. All right, what did you need to do today? He was behind a door pretty much because he couldn't make it on the in the pod or in GP. So every day for those 4 months, I would check in on him. I would get what if he check in on his commissary, talk. Hey, there's some issues with his meds, and that's all he needed. He just needed somebody to kind of care about him, really take his concerns seriously. Felt like he wasn't getting frustrated. And for those 3 or 4 months, I couldn't I was there pretty much every day, Monday through Friday. I didn't take a day off during that rotation. And yeah, he didn't cut himself. That's all he needed. He just needed the structure. All right. Smith is the person I go to if I need anything, and then he'll go and find it, and I don't have to worry about that. Less anxiousness, whatever it may be.
Well, Jason, you're highlighting the idea that transparency and compassion is only allowed when you understand reality and you're educated. If not, you
Yes.
get burned out. You can
Yep.
be completely hysterical and keep thinking you're doing good work when you have these crazy ideas about what's happening there. And people are able to do that. But for
Yeah.
people that are real mental health workers seeking the truth and so forth, you have to have both the compassion, but you have to have the knowledge and education to be able to interact in a fashion so you don't get burned out.
Yeah. And be able to really understand behavior.
Well, you have all kinds of surprising outcomes. I remember one time these two guys that later in life I figure out they were psychopaths, but they were having conflicts in the setting, the jail setting. So the custody officers, this is a time when they have respect for me and I'm integral to what's going on. And they say to me, Carl, can you help this? We're really having problems. We're afraid this is going to lead to assault, this and that. I say, okay, let me talk to them. So I pull them out. I talk to them for 3 sessions. Come on, guys, what's going on here? I mean, this and that, reality stuff, reality therapy, etc., dealing with them about what's really happening. And the custody officer reports they're getting along well. Well, I'm out in the community at a staff meeting. We get a call on a Friday afternoon. The jail commander, hey, Carl, those two guys you were working with, well, they escaped from the institution. They worked together the day to do. I thought, well, shit, man. I guess my family
Sure.
counseling skills are pretty good.
Yeah.
They're
They
working
got what
together.
they needed.
Now, they didn't last long because they were pretty
Yeah,
dysfunctional. They weren't the Ted Bundy psychopaths. These were
yeah,
just, the inadequate run of the mill, the kind that when they get kicked out of the drug program, like one psychopath told me when he got a dirty UA, he says, Doc, and this guy wasn't very smart. And he says, Doc, I really wasn't smoking that pot. Two of the inmates held me down in the bathroom and blew the pot smoke into my mouth. At which point I looked at him and both of us started cracking up because, he was full of shit. He knows
yeah,
I know he's full of shit. So, I
yeah,
mean, that's the key. When they
yeah,
know they're full of it, you know they're full of it, and they know that they're full of it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You just call them out on it. Yeah. So,
But you probably have hundreds of stories like this, Jason. I
oh,
remember a guy doing the
yeah,
Rorschach research. When you do the Rorschach test, you sit next to the patient's side. You give them
yeah,
a card. You say, "What might this be?" And then you wait there. You don't say anything. You wait till they
yeah,
do something. Well,
yeah.
my colleague gives him the card, and he's sitting there. The guy doesn't do anything. He's
Hmm.
kind of paying attention. He's going to sit and wait him out. He's not going to
Yeah.
deal with the passive aggressiveness of this particular guy.
Hmm.
Well, finally, after about 10, 15 minutes, he looks and the guy fell asleep sitting up. So,
Yeah.
or the psychopath that says to me after doing the MMPI in 15 minutes, he turns it in early. I know he's full of crap. He just filled it out randomly. He says, "Oh yeah, doc, I got done fast because I just took a speed reading class over in the joint." So I
Yeah.
mean, we run into within the structure of the setting where they're not harming people, delightful people in many ways. If you
Yeah.
kind of can, if you adjust your expectations.
Yeah. We put the their image, but they show their personality. Yeah, some of them are hilarious, and some of them are really talented, artists or poetry or musicians and things like that. You don't see that, but if you get to know them, and see, and again, wish the best for them, because you don't want them to keep going out. And you want less victims. That's the goal, right? Is and for them to be better in society. Not all
For
of
the
them
one,
like to play that, but some of them,
and for the ones that want to
can.
change, they want the same thing. So it's basically when you think that some of the treatment attempts and things we do is somewhat controlling or dogmatic. No,
Hmm.
if they tell you, Doc, I'd like to be different, don't want to go here anymore, they're giving you permission.
Yeah.
Because really, when you're dealing with these difficult cases, there's only one way to go. You either go back to prison or you're going to have to really change your life completely in the way you
Yes.
think and the way you behave. And you get letters from them from time to time. I remember one guy
Hmm.
was a sad case, really liked him. I'd worked with him in group, and he said, "Well, Doc, I got a job, this and that." But later I would find out that he got shot doing a bank robbery.
Mm.
And he probably wasn't a psychopath. He was just kind of probably in the moderate ranges. And then you always know the psychopaths because they'll send you a letter. Here was one guy that got out. He sends me a letter. He says, "Doc, I just want to thank you and the staff for all the good work you did, blah, 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 all the time and dedication you gave to me. Then you know what's coming. What's coming
Yeah.
next?" He
Yeah.
says,
Got
"But
arrested.
unfortunately, once again, I find myself incarcerated because I was caught defending this shoplifter from these store clerks." And he goes on with the story, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the inconsistencies in their thinking, they don't
Yeah.
understand. If you did such damn good work, why is the
Yeah.
guy getting arrested again? But
Yeah.
there's always a catch. Or the
Yes.
psychopath will come in, well, Doc, yeah, man, I did that thing, but it really wasn't a real gun. And then
Yeah.
by the end of the conversation, you get them to admit that it was a 44 caliber, you know, pistol.
Yeah.
But it's what makes it delightful in the interactions and the respect you gain is, like I
Hmm.
said, it's when you know they're full of crap,
Yeah.
they know they're full of crap, and they know that you know.
Yeah.
Because then they present these absurd scenarios and everyone
Hmm.
laughs. And that's the humor in the room.
Of course. Yeah. So yeah, and finding, you got to find some positive things for working in this environment, because if you don't, then it will get to you. So, like you said, I think we've mentioned it multiple times. As psychologists, you're vessels for all their junk, and when you're working in prison, there's a lot that they want to put onto you or give to you. So, yeah, that's an interesting kind of dynamic of working with this population. It
Well,
at times could be not thankful. Yeah. Go
I
ahead,
actually
Carl.
considered it somewhat of a accomplishment to be
Yeah.
able to gain the respect of people in these kind of environments, whether it was the
Mm,
adolescent in the home that looked up to me, because when you can confront their behavior and stuff, they understand that you care enough to do that. It's not necessarily being nice in typical ways or being weak and gullible. That doesn't gain anything. But when they see that you take the time to fully understand who they are, for many of the we're talking about non-psychopaths here for the
yeah.
most part. Many of those people, that's how you gain the connection. You
Yeah.
don't gain it by being naive and gullible.
Yeah. It's true. All right. So I guess any I guess you wanted to close it out with some tips if you're working in this
Takeaways
environment, I
and
guess. Yeah.
tips. I think I'll give mostly general ones from mine, Jason. And one is,
Okay.
um, you mentioned it earlier. Go into those environments and start with the research, the good research, sound
Hmm.
people that really know what they're talking about. Throw out preconceived notions like Yakkelson and Samanow and the criminal personality. Understand these people from how they see the world.
Yes.
That's your first one. Don't devalue and get down on custody staff and law enforcement. Understand that there's commonalities that you have, as the inmate will also have if they're ready to change.
Hmm.
Never lose your sense of humor. I mean, if you can't laugh at things and see the humor in this, and it's not
Yeah.
laughing at people.
Yeah.
It's that for the people who have the quality to really connect with people and laugh with them about these experiences that you
Hmm.
share. And the other thing, realize that any work you do, whether it's with substance abuse, abused women, any of these kind of things, abusers, is training you for understanding kind of who these people are and how they think. So every opportunity you have, invest fully in that and understanding that. And the final point was be very skeptical about what you're learning in your academic settings, particularly in those environments where the universities have identified with social advocacy, social justice, PC, and other of these kind of, you know, political sorts of orientations, and kind of search through the literature and find things that make sense to not only your experience. And much like we tell our viewers to not ignore their emotions, do the same thing in these environments. If things aren't feeling right, seek for information that explains the behavior and seek the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. That was going to be one. If you don't understand something, find educate yourself on it. Be alert and observe. In this environment. Be aware of your surroundings, I think is a big one that I've learned. Get some good mentors or people that have worked in this environment that have done well, or social support or other psychologists. Humor, like you said, is a good one for that. And then just, you know, I know it could be easier said than done, but once you leave there, do something, not engaged in the environment. Try to, have a hobby or things like that you enjoy. Keep up your physical fitness, things like that. Get sleep. You don't want to go into this environment not 100% because you're going to be dealing with people that will try to look for weaknesses. So try to do that, but then find the humanness in them. Try to help them. Keep your sense of humor, like you said, and there is good work to be done, and just be consistent and reliable. That's all they're looking for. They haven't had that probably forever. So someone that genuinely wants to help them, while understanding what's realistic for them.
And a couple points I'd add to what you said, Jason. You can only help people that want to be helped.
Mm-hmm.
So if they want you to help in ways that are unproductive and still criminal, you can't do that. It's,
Yep.
it's a parting of ways with that. Always read the charts, always read the histories, never discount it. I
Yep.
remember it becomes so absurd with mental health workers. One woman wanted to convince me, and this serial rapist, that in his culture, it was a cultural thing that stealing women's panties and sniffing them in burglaries was culturally acceptable. So I mean, don't buy into any of that crap. I mean, go with what's reality with it. Always read the charts. Don't put yourself in positions you're vulnerable. Many times, if I was going to see somebody in a jail or an institutional setting, I would go read the chart and I would talk to them when they're behind bars before I'd have them in my office. Never ignore the behavior. And, like when we talked about in our last episode, how people will kind of say things like, oh, yeah, he did these behaviors, but he won't do it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Just don't be naive that, yeah, no, you're no way they would do that to the X, Y, or Z, right? So, yes, they want you for something, but if you don't give it, it's not to say that they couldn't then become rageful towards you. So, yeah, be aware of the settings you're going into, and yeah, and show your value to the other staff members, um, and try to educate them the best that you can, um, because yeah, sometimes there's just some miseducation probably too. So, yeah,
And also, I guess we would say, Jason, consider with some of the negativity from custody officers, it's been earned realistically because a lot of
yeah,
mental health people are flakes
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
dealing with dangerous situations.
yeah,
People
yeah,
get assaulted and they get harmed. So it's a
yeah,
serious business. It isn't a
yeah,
business where people flirt at a tea party with kind of
yeah,
crazy ideas.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I think this was a good um, little discussion on corrections, and hopefully in the future we'll have some more guests that have worked in there. They can kind of add their insights to it. So, any closing things, Carl, before we close it out?
I think it feels right, Jason.
All right. So, yeah, this was a fun one. So, I hope everyone enjoyed. So, again, thank you for watching and listening. Again, you can follow us on YouTube. You can subscribe and like on there. You can subscribe and like any episodes or review any episodes on any of the podcast apps, including Spotify and Apple Music, as well as feel free to leave us any comments if you have any questions about working in this environment, or you're thinking about it. Feel free to put any comments, and we can possibly answer them in a future episode. So thanks again, everybody.
Thanks for listening.